Dyes his hair a light purple, won't be seen without makeup, says if his father could see him now, he'd drop dead all over again. For most of his life, he was considered a social outrage. With us on Signature, the naked civil servant, Quentin Crisp. Mr. Crisp, you once said audiences watched you only because they were curious to see how anyone so wicked could still move and talk.
This is true, yes.
What do you think about the audience looking at you?
Oh, I take it very calmly, but you see, I've had a lot of practice, because long before I was as notorious as I am now, I was an object of speculation, curiosity, in the streets of London, or indeed anywhere that I was. So I quickly learnt to be the one among the many.
I've often wondered, since I began researching your past, how anyone could select the life course you did.
Well, I didn't really select it. I was stuck with it. I'm not a dropout. I was never in.
How do you mean that? How do you mean you were
There was
stuck?
almost no way in which I could disguise myself as a real person. Long before I dyed my hair, long before I lacquered my nails. At school, when there would have been no opportunity to tamper with my appearance in any way, I was already an outsider. I was already somebody that all the other schoolboys commented upon.
Would it be fair to, in American, call you a weird kid when you were...
That's right, yes. Completely.
You once wrote that wherever you are, on Earth, as a matter of fact, that you would always be a resident alien.
That's right. I'm technically, in America, now a resident alien. And as soon as the phrase was used, I thought, that's the way it always is. I'm a resident alien.
If nothing else, though, you have been, I seem full of cliches at the moment, but true to your style. You've pretty much been what you are all your life.
Oh, yes. As the years go by, my view of myself changes very little. And therefore, the path is toward being more and more like myself.
I found a remarkable passage you wrote. You said you passed from being an outcast to being almost universally accepted with such speed that you've never had time to experience ordinary life.
That is true.
What made us accept you now that we beat you 50 years ago?
The fact that there are, even if there shouldn't be, fashions in morality. Morality has changed in the part of the world that we know now. And it has changed because power has fallen into the hands of the young. First of all, the money fell into the hands of the young. Now, a young person under the age of 25 with $20 a week has $20 to spend. A person after the age of 25 with $20 has nothing. So a market had to be invented to use up the money of the young. And people who will throw their money about have the world for a footman. So everybody started to pander to the young. The clothes are now all for young people. And the rest of you have just got to force yourself into these clothes. And as the young have always wanted more sexual freedom than their parents thought was good for them, and have always cared less about worldly power, the whole structure of society has changed. The idea of getting on has disappeared, but the idea of getting off is now universal.
I can't tell if you're in favor or not of this.
I'm neutral. I am only saying that as it's here, it means that people's view of sex in general and sexual peculiarity is much milder because the young people care so much less.
Why do you remain neutral? Why don't you have an opinion?
I have very few opinions. They all have to be opinions that touch myself. And of course I'm grateful that the view of the world has changed, because it has meant I am now admitted into the world from which I was once excluded.
You once wrote that it was always better to be a member of the majority.
Yes.
That is an opinion.
That is an opinion.
Well, why didn't you in some way try to make yourself a member of the majority?
There was no way. It would have been hopeless. It would have meant acting every moment of the day as though I were a spy. It would have meant watching my step all the time, because I don't behave the way I do in order to annoy society or in order to placate it. I behave the way I do because this is the way I am. And if I wanted to change this, I would have to watch my step all the time. It just seemed too much to ask.
I can't help but project, and I think if I was a young person as you were growing up in London, literally being beaten when you went into the streets, that I would have taken some steps to disguise it. At least I wouldn't have dyed my hair and worn lipstick.
Yes, this is true. You could avoid the worst of the confrontations. But the progress that I made from what I originally was, when I was a child, of course, I alternately confirmed and denied. If I was at school one day, I would think, oh, I can't bear any more of this, I will make like a schoolboy. It was a great failure. So the next day I thought, this is too undignified. I should go on the way I always went on. Then the opprobrium became so great that I gave up again. So I moved backwards and forwards. And in the end, you have to move into the center. And you have to adopt a life in which you neither try to annoy the neighbors, nor try to placate them. In other words, if you want to develop your lifestyle, you ask yourself, if there were no praise and no blame, who would I be then?
You got me on the edge of my seat. What's the answer to that?
The answer is, you have to decide what you are in a void, without thinking, will this annoy my mother, or will this please my mother, or will this annoy the headmaster, or will it please him? If they weren't there, what would you do then?
Well, what are you?
I am simply myself, as you see me. I am somebody, a large amount of whose personality is feminine, in spite of the fact that my physical characteristics are masculine. Now, this is not a sexual problem so much as a personality problem.
Why do you call it a problem?
Because the world likes you to be solidly of one sex or another. Or rather, it did. It doesn't now.
Oh, and you were saying this is the world's problem, not Quentin Crisp's problem.
It's both our problems. Their problem is how to cope with me, and my problem is how to cope with them. If they are not going to change, and I am not going to change. But now the world has changed, and now the world accepts that we cannot make a list of clothes, ideas, words, postures, occupations that are suitable to men, and another list which are suitable to women. We must start again every day with people as persons rather than as representatives of a sex.
I think you and I would both like to think the world was that open, but I can't help but feel some of our viewers looking at you right now might thinking, who is that guy?
That's right. They do. And indeed, they will, in a time gone by, they would ask me in the street, are you supposed to be a man or a woman? And I used to say, why do you ask? What were you going to suggest we should do? Because how can it matter what sex a perfect stranger is sitting next to you on a bus? What difference does it make?
Let's stop for a minute. You either described yourself or you were described as pathologically lazy.
I am indeed pathologically lazy. Before I do anything, I ask myself one question. Could I possibly get out of this?
I absolutely can't tell if you're putting me on or not.
No, I mean this. I don't ever, first of all, we'll start on the outside. I never say, I can't just sit here doing nothing. I never think, I must find something to do to justify my existence. I merely live my life as well as I can. And when I'm not doing something which either makes money, or which I enjoy, or which pleases somebody else, I don't do anything.
You're almost a threat to the American way of life, but for 50 years you lived in a single room in London, you had very little money, you were a male model, you were unrecognized and unknown. It's only 5 years ago that this all happened. How old are you now?
I'm now 72. And when the book, The Naked Civil Servant, came out in 68, I was then 59. Then when the television play was made in 75, I was 66. And that's when the great changes began. They began a little before that.
You see, in this country, that's when one retires. In a sense, your life started. I mean, you're
That's true. Oh, yes, I retired at birth, in a sense. I never set out to have a career. I did whatever jobs came to hand. And I never thought one day I will be the president of this company or whatever I was working in. I merely stayed alive. If I didn't get the sack, that was a triumph. It's only, as you say, since I've been beyond retirement age that my life has changed so much for the better.
You said, and I don't know if it was facetious, that if your father could see you now, he'd drop dead all over again.
He would indeed.
What did he think of you as a...
Well, he tried to go on as though nothing unpleasant had happened. But this he did with almost everything. He didn't like people, and he didn't like children, and particularly he didn't like me. I was the youngest, and so I was the greatest expense.
It seemed you were almost virtually sanctified on television when your life story was presented. I can't understand why that didn't profoundly affect you.
Well, it did. I am very grateful that it happened. And my way of going on is now modified to the extent that originally I used to walk through the streets scorning people before they had a chance to scorn me. But now, like everybody who's been on television, I wear an expression of fatuous affability.
Can you show me that expression?
Well, you sort of, it's like being royalty, you know, you nod to right, and you must never be in a state where people cannot approach you. You have to be, as I see it, always prepared to speak to people and be with them.
You once wrote that it's always the interviewer, me, who has more to lose than the interviewee, you. What do you mean by that?
Well, it's your program. So the people who rule you can say, why did you allow him to say this or that or the other? I can just go away and never be on television again. I have nothing to lose. I can say what I like. You have to deal with the consequences of what I've said. You're just lucky that I'm infinitely bland.
One day the band is going to march on. Quentin Crisp has been in the spotlight, and as you know, the media passes on. What happens when they're all down the street and you're still here?
I shall go back to living the life I lived before. I've had infinite practice in being a non-entity. The difficulty is for the people nowadays who are famous when they're 16. What do they do with the rest of their lives? I wouldn't dream of mentioning the names of people who 10 years ago were famous and who now are unknown. But there are such people, and they have the problem, because they never learned to be non-entities. They've got to learn now. They've got the long slide down. But I know exactly how to live in a bed sitting room and go out